envenoming. So WHO's role is really to build advocacy, build the visibility around snakebite, but also to build the technical support for both countries to be more prepared, and also for improved management and products to come out to the places in need, the endemic countries especially. So we see snakebite as an emergency in two senses. One, it's a medical emergency. People who are envenomed need prompt and appropriate treatment with the right biologicals. But it's also an emergency because often snakes become more prominent in humanitarian crises or in climatic conditions where the snakes come out, for example, when there is flooding. So in two senses, the snakebite envenoming is an emergency. We are really working very hard to find support to build this relatively new program. In 2018, the World Health Assembly, that is our governing body, agreed and approved, endorsed the resolution on snakebite envenoming. That's our member states actually endorsed a resolution to change status quo on snakebite envenoming. Progress is rather slow. Data is still very weak, but we are moving, and we look for support from the multi-stakeholders to actually make progress. And David will cover some of the areas where we have made progress. We are still looking for matching support so that we can accelerate what we are doing. And so I'd like to wish you all a wonderful summer school. This is a really prominent subject where a lot is still needed in order to make progress, and you are the ones out there either in research or in the field dealing with this problem, and we look forward to working with you, seeing your results, to see how we can use those results to make progress and rid the world from the deaths of snake bites. Thank you very much, and over to you, David.
Okay, hi everybody. I hope the connection is okay. I'm in Eastern Africa this week, so I'm calling in remotely. Just to bring your focus around the work that WHO is doing, I think many people will be aware of the roadmap that was developed and published in 2019, and the 4 key pillars and various priority areas of that roadmap, which you should be able to see on your screens at the moment. The main pillars: engaging and empowering communities, ensuring safe and effective treatment, strengthening health systems, and building partnerships, coordination, and resources. And as Bernadette pointed out, the role of WHO is really around bringing all the people together, building the visibility of this disease to various stakeholders, particularly to governments. And just in the last week, we've had a large multi-stakeholder meeting with sub-Saharan African governments, which has had some fairly positive outcomes. So it's a very important part of the work that we do. But we also have the ability to help to coordinate actions, to set policy, and in some cases to, I guess, shift the compass a little bit. And part of the work that I do in the pre-qualification department, which is focused around trying to improve the quality of the antivenom products that are out there, is we look at these products and we give advice to governments and procurement agencies to help them make decisions. And it's a program that is proving to actually have some teeth. Some governments are actually now taking quite severe actions against manufacturers that don't actually meet the criteria that WHO has, to the sense that their products are being removed from markets. So we do have a fairly large voice if we can make sure that it gets heard by the right people. And of course, the various things that we work on, just to give you an idea of how active we've been between COVID and now, the very primary pillar of community engagement. I think everyone here would agree that if you can prevent a snake bite, you're going to be far more effective and far more cost effective in particular than if we have to actually deal with the consequences after the bite has happened. So we've done a lot of work around developing a landscape analysis, consulting with all sorts of community engagement stakeholders in all corners of the world over the last 2 years to find out what particular challenges they're confronted with and to try and work out a way in which we could help them by providing them with guidance that can help them in the planning of programs, in their own resource mobilisation efforts, and also the very important aspect of monitoring, reporting and evaluation. A lot of work gets done in communities for which there's never any evaluation done to see just how effective it has or hasn't been. And of course, that makes it difficult to improve these programs, makes it also difficult to be able to hold them up and use them as examples of the need for investment in community education if there's no actual data behind it. So we're developing a toolkit that can be used by stakeholders to basically give them the ability to accumulate evidence of the work that they're doing, to help them to get better visibility and to help them to potentially be able to finally crack that nugget of how do they get funding for sustainable campaigns that can really make a difference in vulnerable communities. So as those resources come online, they'll be published on the WHO's health topics page for snakebite. It's a very simple URL, who.int/snakebites. And apart from this, we have a lot of our other information will be available there as well. So it's a URL worth jotting down. Part of the information you can access through that, we have completely revamped the original website on snake distributions that was originally launched back in 2010. This site now contains a lot more information. It's being built out to embrace some of the challenges that we face as a global community, particularly that of climate change and the impact that may have on the distributions of different species of venomous snakes over the next 10 to 20 or 30 years, and how they may impact the need for resource mobilisation, how it could be that people who've never encountered certain species of snakes will suddenly find that those particular species are starting to appear where they live. And of course, that's going to mean that things like antivenoms, there's going to have to be changes in how they're distributed and used. So we use a number of tools to do that, and we're trying to build this database so that most of the data will, in the next year or so, become available for everyone to be able to download and use to support their own work. Key to this, and recently we published some preliminary data from 14 African countries in the WHO's weekly epidemiological record, is collecting data from countries to get a little bit of a baseline of what they actually know about the burden of snakebite in their own jurisdictions. And you can access this, you can look up the countries by year, by region, down to second level administration level, so states and provinces. It's been centered largely on sub-Saharan Africa to begin with, but we're now expanding this into Southeast Asia. And I think the countries in Southeast Asia will be getting questionnaires from us over the next month or so. We hope to have the first lot of data from that region online sometime early next year, and then it'll be expanded as we go to other parts of the world. But if I can turn for a minute to the work that we're doing around treatment, and when we speak to ministries of health, this seems to be one of their most important priorities, is the difficulty that they have in gaining access to safe and effective products that are also affordable, and also just the challenge when they're trying to procure products of knowing which ones are actually suited to their particular country and which ones may not be. Procurement agencies are generally not experts in antivenom. They're not experts in venomous snakes either. If they're told to procure polyvalent antivenom, that's what they will do. They don't understand that polyvalent antivenoms are products that are just suited to a particular group of snakes that were used in the manufacturing of a specific product. Often, we see products from completely different regions ending up in very inappropriate settings because of this misunderstanding. So we are doing some work with procurement agencies and with regulators to try and help them to better understand the challenges and which products are which. And part of the work of that is in producing these target product profiles. The first one for Sub-Saharan Africa has already been published and is on our website, but we have other TPPs for other conventional animal plasma-derived products, for small molecule inhibitors, and for engineered antibody therapeutic products that are in the pipeline as well, and are likely to be published as soon as they've gone through the final process of public consultation and then a review by our technical and scientific advisory group. On the other side of the coin, WHO began a process in 2016 to conduct a risk-benefit assessment of antivenoms. And this was an intermediate step between doing nothing at all and formal pre-qualification. And it was felt that most companies would not be able to meet the standards for formal pre-qualification. And unfortunately, many public manufacturers might actually be driven out of the industry altogether, with countries losing access to the only products that they had if we were to put them through such an arduous process. So we came out with this alternative route. It involves a very robust dossier review process with independent experts, extensive laboratory assessment of the products, both in vitro and in vivo, looking at just about everything we possibly can to learn as much as possible about the preclinical efficacy and safety of products. And then part of the work that I'm busy with at the moment are GMP inspections of manufacturing sites, where we look to determine whether or not the companies are actually compliant with WHO GMP standards or not. And if they're not, then we can direct them to the steps that they need to take to become compliant. And if they manage to achieve that, then we can rule them to be compliant and process to a point where the product goes back to our technical advisory group, and they will look at all of this combined evidence and then make an assessment as to whether or not the product should be recommended for procurement. So we have a lot of products under assessment. In the Middle East and North African region, there are 9. In the South Asian region, there are currently 8. All but one of them are from India. In Sub-Saharan Africa, 15 manufacturers' applications have been received. 2 weren't considered because they were products that were only suited to species from other regions. We have previously terminated 2 assessments. One of those companies has fixed its problems and come back and is being reassessed at the moment, but the other company has not, and its terminated status still stands some 5 years on. We've published 3 product recommendations for Africa, and we have 9 assessments in progress. Currently don't have decisions, but most of those will get a final decision by about June of next year. So for the African region, just very quickly, the products that have been assessed and recommended: Equitab G from Micropharm, Antivitamin Africa from Laboratorios Solanes, and Panaf Premium by Premium Serums and Vaccines. As you can see, there are many other products that are still being assessed, mostly from Indian manufacturers, and 1 product where the assessment has been terminated. All of this leads towards the other question that ministries of health raise, and that is, where do we get antivenoms in a reliable supply so we're not having stock outs, and when people need the product, they can get it? So WHO has been working on a pilot program for antivenoms in Sub-Saharan Africa. It's likely to begin in 8 West African countries towards the end of next year. It is a revolving facility. It's basically going to have to be seeded by donors and then sustained longer term by government procurement. In other words, the first lots of antivenom that we use will probably come through donation, and then subsequent to that, countries will pay for what they use as and when they use it. It's a very data-driven process. We've done a lot of work to understand both the distributions of the snakes, the distributions and the habitat usage of humans, and the confluence of those to better understand activity and risk of contact for the major medically important species. This brings in a lot of data, everything from epidata, health facility cold chain, infrastructure data, a lot of environmental data for both for the animals and for the people and their use of different types of environments. If I can just show you a couple of the things we've done. So these are some of the risk of contact models. The darker colours for each of the species groups show where there is the highest risk of potential contact in these particular countries that we're talking about at the moment. Areas that are unshaded, there's little or no risk, and it gives you a much better idea of which species of snakes may be encountered when and where and with what frequency. We also then take that information and we look at, well, where are the health facilities in those areas where snakebite risk is high? And we can then look at the travel times and estimate how long it's going to take a person living within that catchment to be able to get to a facility. And of course, if it's more than 6 hours, they're particularly vulnerable to weak outcomes. So these maps show that for on the left-hand side for carpet viper envenoming, and on the right-hand side for the other 3 major genera, where the longest travel times are likely to be. We also do the same in terms of the distribution and the logistics. So on the left-hand side for Togo, we've established the travelling times from the main capital where antivenom will come in through to the various regional stores where antivenom is kept, and then towards the middle, where that travels out to the individual health facilities that are allowed to stock it. And we can work out how long it's going to take for product to get to where it needs to go, as much as for how long it's going to take people to get to those facilities for treatment. On the right-hand side, this also enables us to look at risk and the size of the populations that are vulnerable. So for Chad, for example, you'll see that about 53,000 people live in areas of high risk of contact for carpet vipers, but are more than 6 hours from a health facility. But all told, in high-risk areas, there's nearly 8 million people who would be within 6 hours of a health facility, but could be potentially at risk of being bitten by carpet vipers. So there are quite large, vulnerable populations that we need to make sure there's adequate supplies of antivenom to be able to deal with any cases that come through. And then, as I said before, we're looking at what's going to happen into the future. So just to explain this image for you, if you look at the top left, this is the current distribution of Dendroaspis polylepis, the black mamba in sub-Saharan Africa. The bright yellow spots are actual location data that was used to inform the model, and the yellow areas show the most high suitability for the distribution of those snakes. The bottom left-hand side shows the potential future distribution for that same species. And to make it a little bit easier to interpret, we put this other map on the opposite side, and in red or orange, you'll see areas where this snake will probably extend its distribution into as habitat and climate change. The blue areas are areas where there may be some contraction of the distribution as that habitat becomes more unsuitable for these particular snakes. So you can see there are large areas in South and Southeast South Africa where the population of these animals may extend quite a lot. Also up in Somalia, in Nigeria, and in the northern part of Angola. But there'll also be other areas that you can see that are in bright orange, where habitat suitability in areas where we currently expect them to be will also become more favourable. And this may increase the contact with these types of snakes. So we're currently doing this for all of the major medically important venomous snakes worldwide, and we aim to share all of this information on our platform. The last part of this, of course, though, is that you can't just give people antivenom by itself. there's a lot of other stuff that these health facilities don't have. So we've done a lot of work with African clinicians to develop a set of minimum infrastructure, human resource and commodities requirements for managing snake bites, as well as putting together, I guess, the shopping lists for commodity packs for both the administration of antivenom in the initial treatment of snakebite, but also for potentially wound treatment kits for snakebite-related wounds, and also perhaps Buruli ulcer wounds as well. These are the sorts of things that WHO procurement can make available to countries so that they can make sure that if they're getting antivenom to go to these health facilities, they've also got all of the other basic commodities that are needed to make treatment practically feasible. Now, just to wrap it up, I'd just like to play the devil's advocate here, and I want to pose this question. I've posed this to a couple of other meetings as well. And at a time when there are millions of people vulnerable to snakebite, we've got thousands of people who are dying. We've got many more that are being left with disabilities due to the chronic lack of safe, effective, and affordable antivenoms. And we have countries that currently allow products to be registered and used with no evidence whatsoever of clinical safety or clinical efficacy. Can we really afford the luxury of continuing to aim for expensive, complex, and risky clinical trials? And I would argue that no, we can't. We cannot afford to be talking about clinical trials that are going to take 2, 3, 4, 5 years or even more to complete, that are going to be enormously expensive, that are technically challenging to get off the ground, and logistically challenging as well. If people who haven't ever had to run one think it's a fairly easy thing to actually do, but from somebody who has actually had this challenge, I can tell you from personal experience, it's not easy. It costs a lot more money than you budget for. Getting the data, getting everything to be collected properly so that you can have all of that information to compare and get a valid result from, takes an enormous amount of investment. And if you've got people coming into these health facilities every day who are dying because they're not part of that trial, or because they can't afford the cost of the antivenom that's available to them, I would argue that the time has come for us to radically rethink this and come up with a better option. And so to that end, we've again been consulting with clinicians and talking about the possibility of moving towards an accelerated process based on what's called MURI, M-E-U-R-I, which is the Monitored Emergency Use of Unregistered and Experimental Interventions, that was first brought up for the Ebola virus disease outbreak in West Africa in 2014, was subsequently employed again during another Ebola outbreak in the DRC a couple of years later. And of course, during the COVID pandemic, this framework has been used to test a large number of experimental interventions for COVID, simply on the basis that there are so many people who need treatment, it would be unethical to deny them the opportunity to have this treatment, sooner rather than later. So it's been reviewed extensively by WHO ethics committees and also by an independent panel of ethicists from around the world. And they came up with this framework. It has some prerequisites. It needs the agreement of a national government that there should be an emergency use authorisation for a product made. It requires oversight from a national ethics committee. There must be robust preclinical data to support the fact that in clinical use, this product is most likely going to be effective. So it's not like you can just bring any product to the table, and try it out. There needs to be an approved treatment protocol, informed consent from the recipients, and compulsory case reporting back to a data safety monitoring board so that the use of the product can be progressively reviewed in real time. And if there are issues around safety or efficacy, then at the worst case, the use of the product could be halted. and anything in between that. You know, the protocol might be amended, the dose might be changed, various precautions to ameliorate adverse reactions might be introduced. And the idea is that over the course of using this for the people who need it, you'll accumulate the data that you were going to get from a clinical trial anyway, but instead of accumulating it only for a very highly customized group of participants who meet very strict selection criteria, you'll actually have the data for the whole population who are vulnerable to snakebite in the first place. So we're urging people to think about this. We are intending to put this out for public consultation. But again, we feel that it is likely to facilitate more rapid access to existing, as well as new and experimental treatments that may be coming through development pipelines. And that for countries where there's currently no oversight of antivenom safety or efficacy, there's just the issue of a marketing license and the product can be sold wherever they want. We think it will actually improve the situation by providing at least some sort of regulatory mechanism to keep tabs on safety and efficacy, and to be able to stop the use of products that don't meet the requirements.